21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
I have a personal belief backed up by some data that we're going to reach a pretty big existential crisis in the near future. And that is that there's not a ton of people that understand how to use the cloud, like the big three cloud. And a lot of people are banking on AI solving it. And the problem is we train AI on public snapshots of information. We don't train it on privately on how organizations actually run in the cloud. And so we're going to get to this point where we're like just hopes and dreams that AI can solve this for us. And I think we're going to run into that head on. I got invited to write a piece in the Microsoft blog about this about 2 years ago. And, looking at the data from the different companies that do reporting, these numbers that I was concerned with are continuing to drop. One of the things that's deeply concerning to me over the past 4 or 5 years is there's industry surveys from the State of CD report to Stack Overflows. And what we consistently see every year is the amount of people that have experience in cloud operations, like running the cloud, configuring how all of our software is going to work in the cloud. That number decreases every year. And when you look at the stats on the number of software developers on the planet, there's 27 million software developers today. That's more than there are people in Australia, right? Like that's a lot of folks, right, writing software. And it's expected to go to about 45 million by 2030. And so the big problem today is everyone is running their software in the cloud or even in data centers. Let's say data centers or the cloud. We're making more software developers day in, day out. We're producing software developers, but that experience of operating your software, running it in the cloud, running it in data centers isn't something that you learn in school. And it's not something you learn in a boot camp, right? And so we've got this kind of conundrum going where we need more software developers faster because we're making more things on the internet. But these people that are writing the software don't necessarily understand how it operates, how to administer it, how to secure it, how to keep it compliant. And the number of people that do is shrinking every year. One of my big worries is when I first started kind of digging into data around this was before the big AI explosion, where AI is going to take everybody's jobs. And, being a company in this space, my VCs are always like, oh, what are you guys doing with AI? I saw this other company you compete with that's doing this AI thing. But the reality is AI is not going to help us here. It might make somebody who knows what they're doing more efficient, but it's not going to make somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, right? And we see this in all aspects of using AI and LLMs. But the thing that's particularly scary about cloud operations is this is your production systems. This is how your business operates. It's your metrics, it's your usage patterns, it's your architecture. And AI isn't trained on any of that stuff. We train AI on snapshots of our code on GitHub or GitLab. We don't train it on how the actual business is running when the code is executed. And until people start sharing that with LLMs, we will never have a real picture of how businesses operate. And so, can you trust a ChatGPT or a DeepSeek to have all of the intimate details of how your application runs? I don't think a lot of people are going to be too savvy on sharing that information, especially when it's going to save them just a few $100,000 to a few $1 million in operations engineers, right? Like that is the secret sauce of how your business operates at the software level. And that to me is just concerning. We're reaching a point where we're seeing more breaches happen. They're happening almost daily, right? Our data is in there. Your family's data is in there. Our business's data is in there, right? We're getting more stuff in the cloud faster. with less people that know how to do it in a secure, cost-effective, and compliant way. Where do we go from here is an interesting question. I see many companies trying to solve this in different ways. There's this concept of, when I say the cloud, I'm typically referring to the infrastructure providers, like the hyperscalers, as they call them today. There's a lot of things that are kind of getting grouped under that word, the cloud, but that's what I'm referring to. And so there's this adjacent technology, platforms as a service, right? Which were very big in the like late aughts, early 2010s. They kind of fell out of favor, particularly some of the big ones like Heroku, 2015 through today. But what we're seeing is a resurgence of PaaS. And this is interesting. Like, why is this happening, right? So platforms as a service, or PaaS, are these really interesting abstractions that kind of sit in front of the cloud. And I don't want to say dumb it down, but like they dumb it down. They make it easy, right? They let developers think about building something the business needs that makes money. And the developers don't have to think about how it runs. They just say, hey, this is the framework I've been giving from this platform provider. I'm going to stay within the bounds of this framework, and my software is just going to work, right? And that was appealing in the late aughts, early 2000s, fell out of favor for cloud. And in the past 3-4 years, we went from having just a handful of these PaaS providers to having more than I can count off the top of my head. There's easily 10 to 15 that I've seen spring up in the past 3 years, like coming out of YC. And I think these are important. Now, this is a product that if you buy into this product, that is the exact opposite of buying into my product. My product is designed to help you in the cloud. These things are to keep you kind of segmented from it, but they're important, right? And so what's really interesting about these platforms kind of arising is it's addressing the frustrations and needs of the average developer, right? And so this isn't just some numbers that I'm picking out to say, hey, look, I found this thing in a survey someplace, like come buy my products. You can actually see the developers in the market starting to react to this today. And where it becomes particularly concerning is the companies that are just far too large for a PaaS, or they're too heavily bought into multiple different like software ecosystems to be able to move to one. Like the catch of the PaaS is they're fairly restrictive by definition, right? That's what makes them so easy to operate and run at scale for n number of businesses. And so when you look at the number of companies that are still running on the AWSs, Azures, and GCPs, like how do you get that same level of developer experience, right, into their organizations? That is a very hard thing to build, right? Like that is you as a company who maybe is in e-commerce, or maybe you're in banking, or maybe you're in healthcare, deciding to stop and build your own PaaS internally, right? Which is just, it makes sense for the Ubers of the world, the Facebooks of the world, but for companies that aren't in the Fortune 500, that is a second business line you're creating just to support your own internal developers, right? And that's just not, it's not a reality for many organizations, especially organizations that are already having difficulty delivering software. So the way that we think about this differently at Massdriver, it kind of comes from years of me working as a consultant in cloud operations. I would go into these massive organizations, doing 9 data centers to the cloud, and I would see these operations engineers that understood how a data center worked, but they didn't understand how the cloud worked, right? And so you take somebody with 20 years of experience, like running systems in data centers, and then boom, overnight, they had to reskill. Otherwise, they're just a junior engineer again, trying to understand how this cloud thing works, right? And so you'd see these people that you would look at, me as an operations engineer, I would look at and go, that is a seasoned professional that knows their way around the data center. The next day at their job, right? And like that is how most of the industry is, right? Less than 8% of software developers have cloud experience. That's a scary number. And that's just experience. It doesn't mean that they're an expert, right? And so what Massdriver does that's a bit different is we have a very simple take. There was this concept of DevOps that kind of came into fruition, a decade plus ago. And we just lean really hard into that old idea of the point of these two teams is to collaborate. And a lot of people kind of took the definition of DevOps 4 or 5 different ways, and they've kind of backed themselves into these weird corners where developers have to do the cloud. It's like, nah, it was never really about one person doing another person's job. It was about these teams working together better to deliver business value. And so we've designed our entire system for managing cloud around a very simple concept. Nobody on your operations team or on your developer team has to learn anything new. And it's just like, oh my gosh, how do you build a new tool where nobody has to learn anything new? Well, everything in Massdriver from your operations team's perspective is built using the tools that they're already familiar with. Whatever tool they use, it works with Massdriver. And so they can just go about doing things the way they've always done them. And what changes for your developers, that the people that need to put the software into the cloud, that need to get databases, that need to get AI models or whatever, they don't have to learn that operations team's tooling. They don't have to learn the security team's constraints. They don't have to learn the legal team's compliance rules around how stuff works. Instead, what happens is your operations teams are packaging that stuff up using the tools they know, and they push it into our platform. And then for your developers, they literally just diagram the cloud. So they just like they do with any diagramming tool when they're trying to document it after they build it, they just diagram it. And as they're diagramming it, we use those modules that your operations team wrote to do all the provisioning and configuration of the system. So your developers that already know how to use diagramming tools are just diagramming. But instead of them documenting it after the fact, the diagram is actually building the software or building the configurations, right? And so now these teams the operations teams can take all of their expertise, they can package it up using the tools that they're already familiar with, push it into this graphing layer, and then developers are essentially able to wield the power of those operations teams by just putting boxes onto a page and drawing lines between them. Boom. How passwords are managed for databases. Developers don't even think about it. They draw a line from a database to an application, and the rules for how your team stores secrets in the cloud and injects those secrets into apps is all hidden behind the scenes for them. So they just simply diagram, like, this is what my system looks like. They deploy, and they're right back to writing software. They're back to adding that business value, which you hired them to do. And your operations team has completely gotten out of their way while maintaining control of like your business's non-negotiables, and then having a way to understand what the developers did. They have a diagram, right? It's what everybody wants at the end of the day. Like, can you draw a diagram of this? And it's like, yeah, you gotta stop what you're doing and go draw a diagram. Like, we just started one, right? Like, the diagram is your source of truth, which is what we're all after when we're trying to troubleshoot these systems, make them more optimal, or even just understand like why they're as expensive as they are, right? I'm an operations engineer, so that's how I started my life. I started in data centers in the late 90s, early 2000s. My two co-founders are also operations engineers, cloud operations engineers. They worked in data centers, they've worked in the cloud. And so I think one of the things that's very different about the way that we go about all things at Massdriver is we very much take the pains and the struggles of the average operations engineer into account into almost everything that we do. Right. So, when we talk about our tooling, right, we support any tool that your ops team supports. Like, this wasn't something that we were doing because we're like, oh, it'd be cool to support every tool. We know that the reality is any organization that is doing it perfectly probably has a whole bunch of tools that are kind of in flight, right? Let's say you're a company that's been around for 12 years. You might still have some stuff written in Puppet. You don't write anything new in Puppet, but you have old stuff written in it. I don't want you to have to rewrite that to be able to start getting value out of our product, right? So for me, it makes sense to even just support an old tool that most people aren't building stuff with today, right? You might use Terraform, or because of licensing issues, you might have to use OpenTofu. Maybe you use one and then you move to the other, but half your stuff's written in one tool, half's written in the other. Operations engineers are the most underwater engineers in any organization. If you go to any org and you look at the people that have the time and the people that are backlogged, it's almost always operations teams that have smaller teams, smaller budgets, longer lead times to get stuff done, right? And so everything that we do is taking that into account. Like, how do we make them efficient without making them have to go do a bunch of stuff? And so supporting a wide set of tools from Helm to Checkoff to OPA to pretty much anything that you can imagine under the sun was important for us, because we didn't want these people to have to learn new tools or rewrite things to start using the platform. And this goes into just about everything. Like, as far as like our community, like we try to be everywhere. And the reason why is like not because we want to, right? I am not a fan of Microsoft Teams, but we have a Microsoft Teams. Why? Because we have an entire swath of customers that are on Azure and they use Microsoft Teams. They don't use Slack, right? And so it's very important for us to kind of have communities where people are, so they don't have to go get approval to be able to install Slack on their machine just so they can ask us a question, right? It's like, if we have to have our support team in 3 or 4 different places, that's fine, as long as your team doesn't have to be in 3 or 4 different places to talk to us. And we even take this into how we do our pricing, right? Like, here's the rub. Hey, competitors, catch up. It's very simple how to sell stuff to operations engineers. So a lot of our competitors do things that we consider a bit predatory. Sorry, guys, predatory. Y'all are bastards. If I can speak candidly. So a lot of people will price based off of usage-based. Usage-based is the new hot thing. Everybody loves a good usage-based model. But as soon as you start doing that in software delivery, you're telling people how to run their company. If I say, oh, you can only buy 100, for the price you paid, I'm going to limit you on deployments. You can only deploy 100 times, or once you go over 100, it starts costing more. I've just told your company to be less agile. I'm not doing that. You're using my product because you want to move faster. If I bill based on something that limits how fast you can deploy, I've just absolutely stepped on my own foot. And then we'll have other competitors that charge based off of the number of things that you're managing in the cloud. And that sucks, because if you have really stable systems, let's say your legacy systems, the ones that make money, right? And you haven't changed anything about them in the past year or maybe 6 months. Why should I penalize you and charge you for that if you're not actively managing it? So Massdriver's billing is pretty straightforward. In our non-enterprise, I'll get to our enterprise in a second, how we think about that as well. In our non-enterprise, you buy buckets of seats. You can't buy an individual seat at Massdriver. People will be like, I just want one. And I'll tell you what, if you only need one seat, our product doesn't make sense for you. You're wasting your money. Go away. Come back when you have a bigger team. I don't want a single person. Honestly, even 2, there's not really enough there to really feel that collaboration. So we have a minimum of 5 seats. And we have people that come in, they're like, oh, we have 4 people. And it's like, great, we'll cut you a deal. We'll knock that seat price off. But like, we do this specifically so that we don't get people using our product too early, right? They have a lot that they need to figure out about how their business works before they start using a collaboration tool like Massdriver. And so we just do our billing based off of seats, good old fashioned seats. It's not exciting for VCs. Like, can't you do a usage-based model? It's like, we can, but it underserves our customers, and we're not going to do it. And then when it gets to our enterprise pricing, we're transparent. You get unlimited seats for $60,000 a year, right? And it's like, why do you do that? And it's like, well, the procurement process for many operations teams is painful. And if they just see a price right up front, it makes it so much easier. They're just like, that is just way outside of our budget, right? But at the same time, like, we have really good margins, right? And so like there gets to be a point in time where it's like, you can just start adding seats to your Massdriver, and it doesn't cost us anything else to do it, right? And so like, I don't need to go and extract a ton of money from you. I would rather have a customer that's super happy that like, I pay for this thing. It gives me, my team is growing. I'm getting a ton of value out of it. And we have other things you can buy and add on, right? So we can make more money. That's great. And, we'll occasionally like lift the price from year to year, but we even put that in our contracts. So, upfront, we're not going to come back. And, I know one of our competitors changed how their billing worked, and a lot of their customers saw a 10x increase in price. That sucks, because again, when you're delivering software, right? An MBA probably loves that. I'm sure some VCs just slipped off their seats. They're so excited. But as an operations person, I have absolutely bound your hands if I do that. If you come in and change the way that your software is released and to use a tool like Massdriver, and then I change the pricing on you, again, that operations team's underwater. They don't have time to migrate off of something because the billing became egregious, right? And so we want to make sure that these operations engineers trust us. And so that's why we're transparent about the pricing. We're transparent about how much it goes up from year to year. And we put that in the contract because we don't want them thinking, what happens if these guys try to backstab us like, this other vendor did, 2 years ago? How are we going to migrate off? One of the other cool things is we actually offer a feature. We call it anti-lock-in. Nobody's ever used it in the history of Massdriver, and that is you can leave the platform whenever you want. I mean, you still have your contractual obligation, but we go out of our way to make sure that you don't feel stuck on the platform. And not a single customer, while that has sold customers, not a single customer has ever used it, right? And this is just like the way that we think. Like, we're ops engineers. Like, we cannot sell something to people like us that we know is going to make their job harder. Their job is already hard enough. So yeah, it's just ingrained in everything we do. Communication and collaboration it's ingrained in DevOps. It's ingrained in what we do day in, day out, right? And so when we think about internally, like how we want our product to work for communication and collaboration, like that's great. Like we like that is number one in what we're building. But then, like, once we have some functionality built, like, we need to collaborate and communicate with our community, right? And so that is just as important on the marketing side as it is on the engineering side to us. And so, we got involved in a open source project called OpenTofu. It's a fork of HashiCorp Terraform. And we'll bore everybody with like the technical details, but like why we got involved originally was it is a tool the Terraform tool that has kind of become the lingua franca of how you manage cloud. And the licensing changes were concerning to us for a number of reasons. It took the ability for certain people to run it, for people to be able to host it, and to us, we saw it as limiting and forcing the hand of many ops people into only being able to buy a certain class of products. And to me, that is taking choice away from people that already don't have a ton of choices in how they are running and operating stuff. And so we got involved early on, and we're actively involved in the project today. I do a lot of marketing and tweeting and whatnot for it. But where we also kind of got involved, like some companies came in and they threw money at it, which is great. You need money to get things moving. Some people threw bodies at it. They put engineers behind it. And what we've decided to do is focus on like the educational portion of it. So, again, like this is the thing that drives us. We know that there's not a ton of people that have this deep cloud experience. And so I could take an engineer and say, hey, you're going to work on this open source project for 20% of your time, 50% of your time, 100% of your time. But the problem is like, we need to make this pie bigger, right? We need more people to know how this tool works. We need more people to be familiar with this tool. We need more people to understand the cloud in general. And so we kind of took a different approach to supporting this project, and that is doing essentially workshops and webinars on just different aspects of using it. So the first thing we did was we put together like how to generate infrastructure as code from existing cloud resources, right? This is one of the biggest hurdles in adopting infrastructure as code, which is kind of fundamental to being able to manage the cloud efficiently, is if you started building stuff before these tools existed or before you had an understanding of these tools, you have stuff built in the cloud and most people kind of click their way through it. But now you need to reverse that and get it into the code. So we're like, okay, we'll teach people on how we do this. Like, I sell this as a professional service. When you come to use Massdriver, if you don't have IAC, you can buy a professional service for us to do this. And our first thought was, well, let's just make a workshop on literally how we do it. It'll cut into our PSO sales, but a community knowing how to do this is more valuable for us in the long run. It's more valuable for most organizations in the long run, and it's more valuable for my personal data that's stored in these people's cloud databases in the long run, right? And then from there, we went on to doing a 10-week workshop that went from I don't know anything about infrastructure as code to pretty much being a master of using OpenTofu, right? And again, there, it's kind of focusing on we don't have enough people with this expertise. To us, how we can contribute to the community is by growing the size of the community, right? If I can get 5 or 10 engineers using this tool and interested in it, and then they go and fix some issues in the open source repository, that is more than I could have done by just hiring one person and having them go work on it, right? And so I'm looking for a way to kill as many birds with as few stones as possible, right? I want to be a force multiplier here. I just don't want to throw money at something and have somebody go kind of work on it, right? And we do this in all aspects of community and collaboration. As far as our features, it's all community driven at this point in time. We build what our teams need, right? We do a lot of pair programming with our customers where we'll bring them on and be like, show us what you're doing and like where this is falling short. Like, it's not just a, hey, fill out this form and we'll put it in a backlog and build it for you. It's like, oh, you've run into a problem. Can we watch you use this thing and see how you're running stuff in the cloud so we can get a better understanding of like where you are and how this fits into like our grander vision of managing cloud, right? I don't want it to just be a form that somebody fills out. Like, it's, you don't really get the understanding of what they want. And I certainly don't want to build something that I think I understand from somebody filling out something in a roadmap item and then delivering it to them and then being like, oh, you missed the context of like how I use this or how my team kind of functions and uses this product. If you're interested in learning more, go to massdriver.cloud/demo. And so we do our demos and sales even a bit different, right? Again, thinking of operations engineers, I don't want to get an operations engineer on a sales call with me and talk to him for 30 to 45 minutes to realize that our visions don't align. And so the way that we do our sales calls is we have a 7-minute demo that kind of focuses on the way that we think about the cloud. And if you watch that and the ideas that we talk through resonate with you, then I would love to talk to you about how we can work together to make your teams more efficient. If you watch that and you go, I don't agree with what these people are saying, you're going to hate my product, right? And that's fine, because teams are different, dynamics are different, organizations are very different, right? And we want people to be able to make that decision as early and as quickly as possible, because I know your operations team doesn't have an entire week to look at 40 different tools and sit on 45-minute long, slideshow presentations from some salesperson that's not familiar with what you're doing. So massdriver.cloud/demo. I'm also Cory O'Daniel on LinkedIn. I talk a lot about this. So if you're ever interested in hot takes, I serve them up daily.
21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
Imagine a space where triumphs, trials, and tales of entrepreneurship come alive. Welcome to the 21st Century Entrepreneurship Podcast, a gold awarded journey hosted by Martin Piskarik, connecting with listeners in 95 countries and ranking in the top 0.5% of all podcasts. Join our exclusive community, elevate your perspective, and embark on the path to success.